Trigger warning. Game ending AK self-deletion references possibly exists in this chapter.
Chapter 9 My final thoughts. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who has liked, reblogged, and supported all the previous chapters throughout the entire story so far. You were amazing and I loved how you decided to read all of those long posts I put out there. I have no idea how much was read, but I am grateful I have some audience. I need to be grateful to have some people willing to hear me out. And to see that many people have responded so passionately in regards to my question of CancerChaser claiming to be good in the context of everything he did or did not do, made me feel very good inside. All of you who responded made it the highlight of the year for me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. All of the responses have no real preference to me because I don't wish to cause infighting or jealousy. I think everyone's response is equally important. I will pick the most memorable point of the responses to the CancerChaser question. From lettuce, garlic, bacon, tomato. This CancerChaser guy is doing something called projection. He is taking his own faults and placing them on you. It is clear, with evidence on your side, that CC is the one who never did any good for you and hindered you while you did so much for him that could do himself. It is obvious that CC was projecting. He was projecting in his email where he tried to make an empty or poorly aimed threat at me, just like he was projecting when he tried to say that he would do the same in regards to me getting the authorities involved. This man clearly cannot handle anything critical coming his way. He takes what negative things he says and throws it back thinking it would hurt them. But it does not apply to me because I certainly do not try to talk to people who cause me trouble, especially getting in the way of my job. And if he had anything on me, he would just go to the cops. I warned him simply because I was tired of having to hear from forced interactions by him to me. I thought if I told him that I am going to start getting law enforcement involved, he would back off. He did not. So I tried getting them only to be convinced to drop it. I looked up the second number CC used to harass me. It led to a shop I am going to have to keep confidential, because I do not wish to try to get them in trouble for whatever CC did with one of their phones. I told the person who seems to run the place about CC's use of their phone. What I got in response was the man suggesting that I should take CC to court over this if he broke the law. Again, I do not have a war chest to take legal action like this. Hopefully one day I can get enough money for a war chest to respond to CC if he tries anything after the fact, or anyone else who is this intrusive like him. As I stated before, I have never given CancerChaser any interaction whatsoever after responding to his harassing phone call he got through the phone transfer. And months after his projecting email, he went again on Facebook using a different account to send me a message, as I have blocked both of his accounts that bear his real name. I know it is him because the person's account he used on me has the same surname, and through searching CC's real name would also give you info of relatives, and that relative name also appears. I will not disclose details for privacy reasons. I have no idea why the relative would send me any messages to me as I never met the person either, which means it was CC using that person's account. After CancerChaser sent me that very atrocious projection email, I started to consider making this Tumblr blog to write the story. But I waited until I got 100 followers so people would know what was going on. I got much more. A few paragraphs in the introduction was my progress when CC messaged me. And from there I knew I had to write and post this. There was a lot of interruptions that happened behind the scenes that were unrelated to CC or the writing of the story that got this delayed constantly. I initially had a goal of finishing this by end of June or July, but when I covered chapters, it took a huge amount of time for me to finish each chapter, and I learned the real nature of the process the more and more I started working on them. I had to format, check spelling, think, double-check details, cross-reference, review drafts, look at files in relation, search my emails, and tons of other things. All of this on computers I used on a library and computer labs. I also had many interruptions take place, family-related, as well as staying on top of Pokemon Go. Each month Niantic had a community day where a certain Pokemon to catch showed up in mass with a shiny version possibility. As well many other Pokemon Go events such as raid days for legendary birds. I also had busy things to do, such as working volunteering in conventions and scheduled meetups. And finally when I went to the library in October, there was a hiring event for me to get a job and I applied. I did not expect to get hired because I applied to many jobs and got no follow-ups, and to my surprise I got hired. So the job I received had taken a ton of my time, so that caused the chapters to push it even further, and I was working on the 7th one when it happened. I even lost my flash drive containing my files, but luckily I had posted many chapters and still had access to the emails and other similar evidence. All of this is why it took the entire year for me to post all of the story by now. I wish I could have finished it earlier, but again, I used borrowed computers to type this up. It seems to be old news by now, but given the limited time to use computers to write this in a competent manner combined with interruptions, there was no way I could have posted everything before without doing costly measures. I know this may be an old issue by now, and it may be true that CC has not interacted with me since the Facebook message, but that does not exonerate him. What he did was wrong and immoral. No amount of time can change the fact that his harassment was very uncomfortable, and it was very vile of him to get in the way of my job and then start harassing me with hateful messages and willingly sending me very derogatory and hurtful emails. All of what he did is very reprehensible, and he needs to be held accountable for it. And also consider two facts. First, that he lives near where I live and knows my location, which makes his harassment much scary in context. Second, he waited months between the email and Facebook message. Do I need to mention how he called with another number? The man has proven that he lacks restraint. For all I know, he has a plan to hurt me even more. I think he is playing into the waiting game very well and is trying to wait longer times so he can use the time as an excuse to keep harassing me, and I truly believe that. Just because it happened a long time ago does not make it correct and justified. Especially when I could not be able to post this entire story in its full context in a week. Would racial slurs and death threats be completely invalidated if they were reported later with actual evidence? Where was Hulk Hogan's "it happened a long time ago" card? It did not work for him when the WWE scrubbed him off their records for a while over his racist, candid comments. Also, some of the incidents that occurred that were reported later in the not-so-awesome document of #ChangeTheChannel are in fact up to 8 years old when the document was compiled. Not to mention, none of this kind of waiting a long period of time rhetoric has been properly defined despite its strong enforcement. When is the grace period I can properly report incidents? I would love to know, so I properly dedicate all of my life to post the exposure and set all other important matters aside so I can make sure this issue is resolved. Just like how I made sure to redact CC's identifying details, and telling the truth as I remember it. I even had the "happened a long time ago" excuse used on me when an incident was 2 weeks old. Not to mention, I still have nothing but resentment towards CancerChaser because of all the harassment, exploitation, bullying, and everything else has said and done or did not do to me, and I still feel none of what he did is justifiable. He literally asked me for endless favors, and then told me all of that meant nothing to him because it was never good enough, and I proved that with evidence last chapter. I have seen CC several other times after he told me how much a worthless scum I always was to him. But I made sure to never even interact with him. Anytime I see him in person, I either run away and take refuge hidden somewhere, or stay inside until he is far away from me. I have seen him 5 times this way, and the latest is November 7th. I even avoid even approaching the surrounding area where he lives and get off the bus many blocks away to minimize encounters of him. I consider his area of where he lives to be a danger zone. I will continue to refrain from ever contacting CC ever again. I seriously do not care for him trying to get the cops on me because I have nothing to fear. If they did not care too much about my evidence-filled case, then CC would have a lesser time. I am posting about him because I need to bring public attention to this horrendous situation as a precaution of disturbing and suspicious creepers such as CC, and what to do with disturbing situations like this. These heinous actions need exposure as a precaution for people to consider if they get targeted by these kind of creepers. Chasers that are intrusive are very potentially harmful, and CC definitely proved that. And if that is not enough, I recently found the story of YouTube channel Elimination, who described her story about her creepy abusive boyfriend who lived in California. Watching her story was touching because her recounting her bully gave me flashbacks of CancerChaser. I feel very sympathetic of Alyssa and her coming with what she went through. I will leave links to the 2 current parts of her story.
moving on. But if the age difference there isn't enough to prove he was a predator, this person also pressured me into sending explicit pictures of myself and threatened me when I said no, which I did. I felt brainwashed, trapped in my own mind games. And slowly, he broke me down, made me choose sides, and conditioned me to do anything he wanted. I became apathetic, depressed, irritable, anxious. I kept having nightmares about that night. I'd wake up crying or screaming. Since February 5th, I had completely shut down, as if Harris had successfully reprogrammed me to be his little robot. When he texted me, I texted back immediately. When he wanted me to be awake, I stayed awake. And when he demanded pictures, I sent them.
Like Harris, CancerChaser has caused some serious problems for me and certainly is a menace around my local area to me. Here is a list of problems caused by him and his other potential problems. This man's location, as stated many times, is very close to mine, making him less avoidable. This makes seeing him much more likely. We kept seeing each other frequently when we were on better terms, and after his most horrendous actions meant I needed to make sure to avoid him. Even though I do avoid his street, I have seen him close my home this year. But also seen passing past the library, seen him passing past the pizza place I was in, saw him coming out of gym, and finally I managed to find him when I was buying envelopes. And all of those times I tried actively to avoid him. Him being located this close is hazardous for me. I already know how he abused my phone number and email. God knows what else he can do to me beyond that. I also have mistaken several people who have a similar body or look for him, which caused me to be scared until I noticed that it was not him by looking at the person long enough or hearing them speak. This complicates the problem. A problem that would not exist if CC did not abuse me as he did. I also need to take people like him into account when I meet new friends. Before CC, I would have loved people reaching out to me and be my friend, but after that, I now have to suspect such people. His manipulation tactics are another hazard. I have later seen these gambits used again on me from beggar con artists in NYC. I literally had to deal with someone asking for a handout from me and tried using word for word that CC used where he ironically got me to stop liking him forever. Which ties into the previous point. What if I make a new friend and he acts manipulative to me in a shady leechy way? I already have a good idea of what to expect from them. He used me and I feel very exploited by what he did. How many other people will never appreciate what I ever do for them? I try to give credit when it's due when I am able to. Not only did CC never give me any credit, he also outright told me I was a worthless. Want to read that last line of the email again? I was a good friend to you, but you were not to me. This last one actually does not apply to me, but would apply to anybody who are unfamiliar with gay people. CancerChaser's actions as whole are a monumental disgrace to all homosexuals everywhere and can potentially set the LGBT movement far back. I am fortunate can identify CC as an outlier and can separate him from homosexuality, because I have met some wonderful gay people who are leagues superior to even CC at his best. One of them treated me with generosity, and I told him how very grateful I was to him and I will never forget what he did. Another was nice to me, hosted a wonderful event I participated in, and gave me a drawstring bag. So I know not to judge LGBT community just by CancerChaser's terrible actions. I can separate him from his sexuality and not judge any gay person from this just because they have the same sexual preference. But imagine if CC was the very first gay person someone has ever met and he gave them the same abuse and forcing that I received from him. Now add in all the negative stereotypes, prejudice, stigma, and all the homophobia in regards to being gay. CC's abusive and manipulative behavior can make people homophobic, and this is just very wrong. CC is the worst kind of person to meet if you are neutral or biased against homosexuals. The LGBT community has enough problems as it is. They need to never be characterized as harassing bullies, selfish leeches, or unrestrained creepers. That is the last thing they need. All of the struggles to come out of the closet are hard enough. CC brings nothing but dishonor to men who love other men. In my subjective opinion, he is by far the worst homosexual man I have ever met in my entire life. I need to now answer another question he asked. Specifically his response to when I was nervous around him in the beginning of 2017. Who I am? Count Dracula. No. CancerChaser is not Count Dracula. Count Dracula is a fictional character created by Bram Stoker. He may be a predator who drinks blood of his victims, But he is not a real human being, and he is incapable of hurting real people. CancerChaser is a real person who I consider a real terror. From his persistence of harassment, to his overgrown petulant behavior, his blatant disregard for responsibility, his parasitic behavior, and lack of self-awareness. I feel he is a dangerous person who hurts people in real life. Unlike Count Dracula, CancerChaser is not a character in popular media. He is a real legitimate person I have actually had experienced. And I find him to be miles scarier than the Dracula character can possibly be. CancerChaser does a massive disservice to homosexuals everywhere. He is to gay people as Osama bin Laden is to Muslims. As far as I'm concerned, he is the Momokun of the LGBT community. CC is pretty much the bare equivalent to the likes of video games such as Action 52, E.T., Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, Superman N64, Zelda the Wand of Gamelon, and Bigger Eggs. He managed to outdo every person who had wronged me throughout the time we knew each other and every person who hurt me in the past since 2008. Jay the Junkie Beggar. The abusive paramedic. That one psycho I had to deal a year before I met CC. Hell, I was treated better by people on the streets who wanted to beat me up than how CC treated me. I got better courtesy from people yelling profanities at me in person and pressuring me out of my money. And at least Jay, the abusive paramedic, or everyone else I listed in this paragraph never abused my phone number or email, something CC definitely did on both fronts. He was hardly any good to me. Friends I already have met later already outrank him. The reason I wanted him to play games with me is because everyone was and still is very busy in their respective lives, and now I am, too. Complete strangers have done much better than what CC has done at his best. When one of the most positive things about him is that he is not a thief, that is just sad. But even if he was better to me, his attempts to get me to leave my job is still very immoral. I have people in my local area who play Pokemon Go, and we help each other all the time. The people in the local raid group give me rights to the raid areas when they can, and I find them to be valuable. If I treated them like how CC treated me, with such reckless selfishness, I would be excommunicated. I would receive much less help from them and my experience would suffer. I need to reiterate that one girl who I claimed was my girlfriend to CC in vain attempt to get him out of my life. She was a girl I wanted to love and I met her in college. She rejected me and unfriended me on Facebook. After that I left her alone. I never spoke to her again. If I treated her the same way CC treated me, with that kind of selfish lust and controlling demand, I would get restraining orders and might get in serious trouble with the college. I would rather live out in the cold and negative Fahrenheit degree weather than to ever even approach his home. He is just that toxic. I have never had to deal with someone this horrendous in my adult life ever. That is pretty much the end. I have nothing else to say about CancerChaser. So I will end this chapter and story with this paraphrased and modified quote from Urinating Tree, because the tone template fits my feelings of CC and all what he did to me these past 2 years. Congratulations to CancerChaser. He has acted so horrendous that every other offender that I had to deal with this decade can walk with their heads held high as they didn't conduct themselves in such putrid selfishness. His terrible behavior convinces people to hate everything pertaining to homosexuality to the point of 1860s bigotry. This man is better off shunned from any LGBT community. People may think he represents the worst of chubby chasers, but I call him a travesty upon the human race who just happens to fetishize overweight men. He has hurt too many people and should be ashamed for it.
Comments.
So wonderful.
I hope CancerChaser leaves not just you alone but everyone else he bothers. And I mean forever. He needs to be alone until he reforms. But never go back to the people he hurt.
My pleasure. No problem. Good job destroying this freak.
CancerChaser just got totally destroyed. Holy crap.
Mega roasted.
Yeah!
You fucked him up.
CancerChaser had it coming. That is one epic destruction of CancerChaser.
Many thanks for putting my quote, and not judging gays or LGBT based on this rotten apple. So happy there were gays who are wonderful to you. Hopefully, I could be one, too.